Hi, I'm Ralph Bass. I'm the author of a book entitled Hope for Today's Problems. It's a book on counseling. I did marriage and family counseling for several years, and during those years I found myself writing various bits of material, using them as handouts for my clients, doing this in order to provide more information that I could share with them in a counseling session, and also to provide them with homework assignments. In time, I gathered all this together and created a book. And I entitled it Hope for Today's Problems, because problems need hope. Problems without hope are most discouraging and depressing, and of course just ruin a life. But for the believer, there is hope. And so I wanted to share that in this book. In fact, the very first chapter in the book is entitled Christian Problem Solving is for Christians. And so we deal with who is the proper candidate for Christian counseling. And we move on, and other chapters are how to solve a problem God's way, not yours. That's important because there are many attempts to solve problems that in fact exacerbate the problem, make it worse, because it's not God's way to approach the solving of the problem. Then there's a chapter on how to talk to your mate without getting your head bitten off. We all know that communication is a critical element to any relationship, and that's the reason this chapter is near the front of the book, because very often if we could simply talk properly to each other, we'd have a lot of problems solved. In fact, I was asking one lady once who was in counseling with her husband. She'd give me a long list of issues that needed to be addressed. It was a good list. And I asked her about one thing she had written. It was communication. I said, now if we could resolve this one issue, communication between you and your husband, what percentage of the total problem would be solved? She thought a minute and she said, well, probably about 90% of it, because the problem is we simply can't talk about the rest. And so that's an important chapter. Other chapters involve how to forgive when terribly wronged. I remember talking to one lady and asking her to forgive her husband for a terrible sin, and she said no, she couldn't do that. She said, let him feel the pain I felt, and then maybe I'll consider forgiving him. Well, that's just not the way God treats us. And we need to understand that we are called by God to forgive when people sin against us. How to cure emotions in turmoil. This is the big one, because people have a lot of emotional instability in their life. A lot of problems dealing with emotions like depression and anger and anxiety and worry and hate, things of this nature. So it's very important to know how to address this very difficult and area of the emotions. That's something often people just can't seem to get a hold of that. It's not physical, and they find themselves slaves to their emotions. Go on in another chapter and deal with the subject how to heal hurt feelings. People will hurt us, no question about that, and we will tend to carry that if we're not careful. So we have to ask, what does the Bible say about that? Here's one that's rather strange. How to suffer for doing good. You might ask, well, why would I want to suffer at all, let alone for doing good? But Peter addresses this subject, and the fact of the matter is we should do good, number one, but number two, we will often suffer regardless. And the Bible speaks to that topic. And then, of course, one of the big ones in an era in which we live, how to deal with depression. And I subtitled it, Taming the Beast Within. So I'd encourage you to look at that chapter if you're dealing with depression at any level. And the last chapter is entitled, How to Change, Putting Off Adam and Putting on Christ. Now that's a good last chapter because it deals with the subject of change. We have to make change in our life. In fact, that's what sanctification is all about, change. Us becoming less like Adam and more like Jesus. And many of the problems we have in life demand that we change. And so here is a chapter that helps us address that question and learn actually how to do it, how to pull it off. So I'd encourage you to take a careful look at this book, Hope for Today's Problems. It may provide a great deal of hope for you in the issues of life that you're dealing with. Thank you.